Hello and welcome back to the Transfer Flow. And on today's episode, Barcelona beat Atletico Madrid, but there's still work to do for Diego Simeone. City beat Fulham, but why are we skeptical of Pep Guardiola's side's resurgence? Sunderland draw away at Anfield. What was brave about their approach? Why Leeds shouldn't sack Daniel Farke? And Wilfried Nancy takes the reins at Celtic. What can they expect from the new coach? That's all in today's episode of the Transfer Flow. So we're back for another midweek edition of the Transfer Flow. Thankfully, we've got midweek games to talk about now as we approach Christmas. And joining me today, Neel, it's like looking in a mirror. I subbed in for you on Monday's episode that became Tuesday's episode. Then we had another episode that messed up. We've had a kind of a disaster week for recordings. But Neel Scheller, it's good to have you here. How are you doing, man?
I'm doing good. Like I've got two functional hands. That's
All
very
right.
good. I think that's one better than you. So, yeah, having a good time.
Yeah, we've got one functional hand, fewer than usual. Ted's house doesn't have power. It's not going super well.
I was telling you she's the great first world country of Great Britain. Like if you'd expect someone to lose power, would you think it's the dude in Asia or the guy in England who's going to lose power?
In fairness, Ted is in the West Country. So there are stereotypes about that. But yeah, that's what comes of living in a shithole nation, Neel. Power drops out at all times. It's an absolute disaster. Okay, right. We are starting today with Barcelona Atletico Madrid. This was the biggest game of midweek, I would say, and it went kind of exactly the way that good Barcelona games go. They are never defensively impregnable. But on this occasion, they were able to create a huge number of chances for themselves. They dominated possession. The stat line looks exactly as it normally does, in a good Barcelona game. You give up 7 shots, but all pretty decent shots. You get 18 shots of your own and all very good shots. This is good stuff for them. And Barcelona have needed a game like this. It's kind of surprising that Atleti were not able to punish them in this match in the way that other teams have. What do you think that was about? Was that about Atleti or was it about Barca?
Yeah, I feel like that was more on Atleti, to be honest, because I thought they started the game pretty well. Obviously, Barcelona had more of the ball, but Atleti, I thought, started off with quite a good out of possession setup, which was more of a high to mid block situation, something between like a 4-1-4-1 and 4-1-3-2, where the number 10 would kind of step up to close down the centre backs and passing lanes, and I thought they did well to limit how much Barca's defensive midfielders, I mean, mostly Pedri. It was fine if Garcia had the ball, but they kind of limited Pedri very well by tracking him closely. Also tracked Fermin Lopez well, so blocked out the center of the pitch pretty well, and stayed high up, so restricted Barca from gaining too much territory. And so I think they started off pretty well. Were competitive, didn't really create much. In fact, the shot that they scored with was their first shot of the match on the 20th minute. But they did threaten. I think they had a couple of moments, of course, where they got caught offside, but there were runs in behind. And I mean, we've said this before as well, but I think Atleti have, over the last couple of seasons, been the team who have kind of consistently been the best at breaking Barca's high line.
Yeah.
And they do that through a couple of ways. So one is kind of secondary runners. So you have the striker kind of staying up top, pinning Barca centre backs. And then it's either a winger or an attacking midfielder who spins around and makes a run in behind from deeper. So while Barca are looking at the striker, it's actually someone else who's breaking through from deeper with more momentum, who's going in behind. And in fact, that's kind of how the goal comes about. And they also make a lot of curved runs for that. So it's difficult to track that player because he's, for one, coming from deeper, but also curving his run. So, you can't really keep up with him. You can't really know where he's going. And then, of course, he eventually gets in behind. So that's kind of a blueprint which Atleti have followed to, I would say, an equal amount of success, really, over the last couple of seasons. Not much has changed with the way Barca defend. So all good for them until then, I would say. But after the goal, they kind of dropped off. I mean, obviously, Barca got a equalizer pretty quickly, but then it was pretty much one-way traffic. I mean, I should say also the equalizer was a pretty I'm sure Diego Simeone would be very frustrated by how it came about, because they were
Mm,
kind of dropping back. It was like fairly lower block, but they kept a bit of a high defensive line, which got kind of beaten in behind. All the
yeah.
while, there was no pressure on the ball at all. Like they just let Pedri run through the middle, which is fun fact, not a good idea. So that cost them the lead, which having the lead would be a huge advantage for the way Atleti would want to play, because then they could like set up and even get more counters going, and try to get a second goal. But now they were back to square one. But I don't think their kind of out of possession ever recovered. They didn't quite step up as high after that, and so it was pretty much one way traffic for Barca, and that really only ends one way. Like especially when they
Mm,
have all their first choice forwards, no low block really has been able to keep like a full strength Barca team quiet. And
mm,
that's what happened. I mean, obviously there was a missed Lewandowski penalty, which would have given them the lead in the first half. To be fair, like Atleti did come out a bit better in the second, but it was still like Barca were the likelier team to score. They did, and then as always, I think Atleti, in a negative game state, chasing the game late,
yeah.
aren't really great. So couldn't really do much. Tried to do obviously something, push more people forward, but then that cost them in the end for the third goal. So that's how I kind of saw the game as a whole.
Yeah, the Raphinha goal is the kind of goal that makes me think there's not much point being Atletico Madrid if you're going to give up this
Yeah,
kind of
exactly.
this kind of chance. Like, I don't really understand why this should be happening. But are we still seeing some effects there of Atletico Madrid transitioning into this new kind of style? Do you think that's what that is there, or do you think that it's a deeper problem for Diego Simeone?
I mean, I don't know, but like the goal itself is just, I guess it's just one very stupid moment. But
Mm,
I think like on the whole, from what I've seen, like the out of possession stuff, I'm fine with. Is that they are able, like I said, for the first 20 minutes, I thought they were pretty good at like a higher block, and the way they executed it, it was kind of a hybrid setup, as I described, and they were able to block out the midfield well. So I think they did pretty well there. And then, of course, they certainly still have the capability to drop into a low block, although it's obviously not as like super solid as it used to be, and
mm-hmm.
that's, I would say, partly through largely through personnel. The quality of the kind of defensive players they have isn't as high as maybe it was before, but it's also, yeah, you do get these kind of silly moments from time to time, which, yeah, I mean, maybe is because they're kind of, the players are kind of caught between the two approaches,
Mm.
or maybe it's just because they're silly, like they just, it's not about the approaches, it's just a kind of, they just switched off. So yeah, that's the interesting one. But yeah, to me, the like the way I see it is, if you can't do that, like lockdown low block stuff anymore,
Mm-hmm.
then you've got to, on the flip side, be a better attacking team, which is like able to push when you're like trailing for the last 15 minutes, for example.
Sure.
So if you can't do either of those things, that's when it becomes a problem. And I mean, to be fair, we should say like Atleti were in good form going into this game. I think it was 7 consecutive wins.
Mm-hmm.
So like they were doing better than the start of the season. Obviously, they have gotten better. But yeah, I still think there's some um, like tactical, it's all kinds of issues. It's tactical, but it's also the squad, and it's various things coming together that leaves them here. I mean, at the end of the day, we have to remember they are like the third best team in Spain, or even should be the third best team in Spain based on like the squad and the resources they have, and all of that. And they're only a point behind Villarreal in the table right now, so not disastrous. But if they'd won, they would have been level with Barca. But I don't think they have it in them right now to be level with the top two.
Yeah, what we've seen from them is, I guess what makes it disappointing is that before the season we were hoping that maybe they could be on the edge of this category that contains Barcelona and Real Madrid, and instead we've got a very clear first and second rank in the league, right? And you might even want to break that up further depending on your views on Barcelona and Real Madrid, I guess. But Barcelona and Real Madrid are together right now, and then a big step below them in expected goal difference, you get Villarreal and Atletico Madrid. Barca are now top, They've obviously got Raphinha back, and Raphinha came back with a bang in this game. Got a goal, but also had over, I think he had 1.2 expected goals and assists in this game. He had 4 carries into the penalty area. Really important in their progressive carrying game as well. Was an
And out of
important
possession.
and out of possession. Was one of the guys who won possession in the final third. They had a few of those in this match. Now that he's back, is it as simple as the return of Raphinha and Pedri kind of takes this team back towards where we hope they should be? Or is it still going to require the other stuff we've talked about, which is somebody in the back line kind of taking charge of the offside game the way that Inigo Martinez did last season?
Yeah, I mean, obviously that would be very good to have, but I think as you said at the start, it's like these are kind of the games we expect from Barca at this point, which is give
Yeah.
up a good few good shots, but create far more slightly better shots. And on most days, given the quality they have with their first choice forwards, they'll still get you the wins in La Liga at least against most opponents. So yeah, I think obviously having Pedri and Pedri especially, being able to like dictate play and play through the thirds. Like when Atleti dropped off, he got into the game so much more, and he was helping them play out in midfield so well as he always does. And Rafinha as well. Yeah, the kind of fluidity he brought was important, especially like for that goal, for example. He obviously starts on the left, but makes that run all the way across to the right channel, and
Mm.
scores from there. So he adds a kind of added layer of dynamism to Barca's attack in possession, and again out of possession leads the press. So important from both sides. So yeah, just them two being back, I think does make Barca, yeah, definitely much closer to the top. Can they go the distance? Is always going to be a
Mm.
question,
That
and
is the question.
I mean that's the question we had last season as well, and they didn't do so badly. But obviously, I think Real Madrid are better this season compared to last. Uh, and then there's the question of what happens in the Champions League as well, right? Like, what kind of knockout opponents will they get? Will they get into the top 8, or will they have to go through the added round? All of those things are important questions for them. So
Yeah.
yeah, a lot of question marks, I guess.
Yeah, and of course the other part of it, which is like, what is it going to do to this team to have someone like Lamine Yamal playing against 10 men against Chelsea, and then a few days later they have another game in the league, and then they go into another big midweek match 3 days after that. They've got previous doing this, running these guys into the ground, and that is
And
the
it's a
kind of the
it's a World
scary
Cup
thing
year
here.
coming up as well. So
Yeah, exactly. So this is the scary stuff. Okay, well, shall we leave it there then? Because obviously we will see. I imagine that lead at the top of the Spanish table is probably going to change hands a few times. Um, should we head over to the Premier League then, who had pretty much a full complement of fixtures? Where do you want to start? Who's interesting you after this round of matches? Because we saw some really dramatic goal fests, like Brighton, Villa, Man City, Fulham. We saw some other teams take care of business. We saw some upsets. Who's standing out to you?
I guess let's start with Sunderland,
Hmm.
because they've kind of kept up pretty well. I think they were obviously had an unbelievable start to the season, but then from November, like they had just a couple of draws. It was like Everton, for example, lost to Fulham, and then maybe there was some thought, okay, are they running out of steam now? Are they kind of starting to come back to the not into the relegation zone, but closer to like the bottom half of the table, and slipping backwards as we all expect. But then they beat Bournemouth on the weekend and drew at Anfield with Liverpool, which obviously isn't a kind of as huge an achievement as it used to be, perhaps, but
Sure.
still, a pretty good result for them. I think haven't won there since the 1980s or something. So more so than just the result, though, I think their performance is what impressed me. And again, with everything I say, there's a caveat of obviously Liverpool are weaker and teams are kind of taking more risks against them. But I was impressed at kind of how willing they were to engage in a more open game.
Yeah.
Not a completely open, like the kind of games we expected Liverpool to want maybe at the start of the season, but to open it up in certain situations where it obviously could benefit them if it went well, but they could also get hurt if it didn't. So that's kind of the thing that stood out to me, because like obviously Liverpool had more of the ball and a bit more territory throughout, but in fact, like even at the start, I thought Sunderland looked a bit more threatening in like the first 15 minutes.
Hmm.
And I think it's just the way they managed, how obviously they're defending collectively, dropping back, but also starting high up the pitch against like goal kicks, for example, and not just sinking into a low block, trying to stay compact in a mid block. And then what they do after turnovers, trying to play forward very quickly, not so much worried about retaining the ball as much as trying to threaten with, for example, balls in behind, looking for Broadway. So yeah, I think it was, their approach was, and they did get the goal ultimately off a high turnover, obviously deflected shot as well, but the equalizer was also
Yeah.
deflected. So yeah, like I think a good kind of like good intent, positive approach, and yeah, deserved the point. I would say well enough. I mean, obviously at the end, after they dropped back and Liverpool equalized, they added more pressure, but they did hold on like well enough. And yeah, I mean, they're obviously overperforming their expected points and all the other metrics by a pretty significant margin. But I think like just this kind of an approach is interesting to me, because like if you contrast this to Burnley, right?
Mm.
Like Burnley wouldn't do this. They would probably just drop back
Yeah.
and try to hit, like have all 10 people in their own half the whole time, and then send someone on the counter and hope it works out. But it's not worked out for them. Like if you look at it on paper, like Sunderland squad and Burnley squad, there isn't a massive like the difference in quality isn't worth however many points. It's what 13 points between them. And
Mm.
again, there's obviously underlying differences in the underlying numbers, but I think yeah, Sunderland do deserve credit for this approach that they've kind of taken. And in the way the season is going right now in the Premier League, where you know teams are like most of the teams, including the big teams, are being fairly open. It's worked really well, and obviously they get other upsides with like set pieces, for example. They do well in this game. They had like a nice corner routine which Alderete flicked off the post. So obviously Mukiela's long throws. So I think they've adapted to the league really well. And yeah, I mean we've said this before as well, but it looks really really good for them. Like uh, relegation already seems quite unlikely, and yeah, I mean top half finish, I would still be extremely surprised if they get it, but they're still sixth, so not bad over a third of the way through the season.
Yeah, I think I agree with you that they do seem more willing to engage a bit higher up. And I think what we've learned in the Premier League, and I think this has been especially true of Liverpool this season, is that Liverpool are not great under pressure right now. But if you
Yeah,
let them camp out in the final third, they are still going to be able to do stuff, right? The problem is that they can't consistently get it, or one of the problems is that they can't consistently get into the final third without giving up an awful lot going the other way. And I think the teams who played them earlier in the season were perhaps a little bit, were obviously basing it on last season and were more willing to cede that territory. Sunderland did build a squad that at least can compete physically in the
yeah,
Premier League.
yeah,
Like
that's
that's
true.
something they really focused on. And as a result, like when you see them in these games, you think, well, athletically, this team is a match for the sides around them. That seems like something they were willing to pay a premium for. Um, Plus, of course, and this is something that maybe we'll come on to when we talk a bit about Bournemouth and Leeds, but it does also feel like the changes in the way the Premier League is played do benefit a team like Sunderland. Because I think they do get slightly more possession than they would have in previous years. I do think that teams are maybe like there's a little bit more chaos, which perhaps benefits some of these like weaker sides in personnel. Whereas in the past, I think we might have seen a team like Sunderland have 39% of the ball and go straight back down. Now a lot of these sides are kind of in the Dyche zone where it's like 42% plus, and that does kind of make the difference for them.
Yeah, the other interesting thing, especially when you mentioned Leeds, which I've been thinking, especially after this week, is like how when you look at the three newly promoted teams, Burnley are obviously like worst off, and
Mm,
they are in this position where they've changed the style of play significantly from last season, right? The way they were
yeah.
playing. I mean, obviously they weren't playing like Leeds in the Championship, but they weren't also dropping into like a low block in their own third
Yeah.
with a back five. But we'll get on to Leeds, but like Sunderland as well. It's worth remembering they weren't like a particularly dominant side in the Championship either, like possession or
No. No.
most metrics you look at. In fact, not exactly like this, but these were the kinds of games they were trying to play there as well, where they have a solid out of possession shape, do look to hit teams in transition. Obviously, Wilson Isidore had a pretty good season leading the line then, and like they've been able to carry over quite a bit of what they were doing in the Championship to the Premier League. Obviously, with different players and a different level of intensity, but like they haven't had to like overhaul themselves tactically. And I do wonder if
Mm-hmm.
there's also some merit. I mean, I haven't looked into it. I couldn't find of a very like cursory search any research, but I'm sure there must be something of like promoted teams that stick to their style of play versus promoted teams that change it up. Who
Yeah.
has more success in staying up? Because I feel
Mm-hmm.
like this. I mean, obviously, again, there's a pretty significant squad overhaul that's happened, but at least tactically, they've remained fairly consistent, and there's some merit to be had with that. And that's, I guess, true of Leeds as well, right? Obviously, they aren't nearly as dominant as they were in the Championship, but they were trying for a long time, at least, to like use similar structures, build out in a similar way.
Mm.
And even though the results were going so well, like their underlyings were not bad at all. So it's interesting to like kind of compare what's up with Sunderland, Leeds, and Burnley. Although obviously, if we do go on to Leeds, it's also true that they have changed things up a little bit in the last couple of games, where they obviously most notably this week, where they got a result against Chelsea. Thankfully, right after I wrote that Chelsea were the second best team in the league, so
Yeah.
good timing for that.
Yeah,
But
so we saw a back three from them.
yeah, exactly, yeah,
But yeah, they have changed things up. I mean, like things have been kind of rough for Leeds this season. Because I think they've been better than their results.
yeah,
Before this match they were down in the relegation zone. Expected goal difference, they're kind of 10th, 11th in the league, like right in the
mid
middle.
table, yeah.
And in this match, they came into this game on the back of 6 losses in 7 games. And I looked at their expected goal difference in that period, and they had 9.9 xG4, but only scored 7, 10.4 xG against, and conceded 16. So I mean, that was a bit
Hate it
rough.
when that
And
happens.
yeah, it's a bit rough. And to be honest, the defense is bad. Like the defense is not good.
Yeah,
But the attack is pretty much mid-table. I mean, either way, it's not a team that should be relegated. And while they're pretty low down right now, the parity in the table means that a couple of results and you can really fly back up. There are 10 points between 4th and 17th. So we should probably expect some weird shit to happen this season.
I mean, there's like no way Villa should be third by any metric in the world,
I,
and
I
they're
just
third.
I would like to say something nice about Villa today because the Villa fans are always really, really angry, but like it is actually quite hard to talk about Villa in a positive way. But I mean, like Leeds, what they did do, okay, is smartly moved on from the guys who dominated the championship. I mean, I'm glad. Obviously, everyone's glad not to see Mana Solomon. Good riddance. But like last season it was like Piru and Daniel James, like these guys they were getting a lot out of, and even Nyonto as well. And Nyonto I think has got 4 starts. James has got 4 starts. Piru's got 2 starts. Like most of these guys are not playing, and instead of getting a kind of more classic 4-2-3-1, we're getting like 3 guys in the midfield who are going to work really, really hard, and then attackers are kind of expected to produce something.
Do something, yeah.
And actually, it's they are hard to play against now. Like having Stack in there with Ampadu, especially, like does make them extremely difficult to play through. That said, the game we're talking about here, like I think a lot of us thought, well, this is quite a winnable game for Leeds because Chelsea, okay, they got an easy ride against Barcelona last week because they played against 10 men, but then they went down to 10 against Arsenal, and that was like a long slog, and they worked super hard. So you were looking at those 2 games, and you did think, okay, those 2 games plus no Caicedo, this is going to be a tough one for Chelsea. And Leeds were genuinely very, very impressive. Had 29% of the ball but had 17 shots to Chelsea's 14. So I mean, if that isn't an indication of a team having no control, then I don't really know what is.
Yeah, and I mean the XG is even crazier. It's like 2.79 to 0.96. So it's and that's after Leeds scored in like the 6th minute. So like largely in a positive
Sure.
game state, they kind
Yeah.
of absolutely like battered them on the XG's score line. So yeah, it is a change from them, of course, but it's probably a necessary one as well for at least this kind of game. Against a team like Chelsea, there's more value in just trying to be solid and hit them on the counter, especially if there's weaknesses like you said with Caicedo out and them being tired. But yeah, I think what's going to be more interesting to see with Leeds is how they go about in like most of the other games against like the rest of the massive mid table. Like they've got Liverpool next, so maybe they do something similar. But then like Brentford, Palace, and then there's Sunderland. Like how do they shape up in these games? Because like as you said, though they didn't get results, like their performances weren't bad with the way they were playing. And
Mm-hmm.
while there's obviously room to improve defensively, I think especially in possession, the ideas they were kind of carrying forward from the championship were still working well enough with different set of players and some different approaches. But especially in midfield, for example, getting one of the defensive midfielders to drop into the back line,
Yep.
trying to create like different angles and play forward through them. Those things were working. So yeah, that's what I'm more interested to see in coming games for Leeds. But yeah, as you say, like this is also very much a team that can stay up, has the potential, and has got like I think one of the big questions with them was how much will they get out of their attackers, and
Mm-hmm.
and the kind of positive so far is that they have gotten enough, um, and if they can keep that up, and not concede whatever it was, 17 goals of 10 or 11 xg, they have a pretty good chance, I think.
I mean, they definitely could use an extra attacker. Like
Oh yeah, oh yeah.
they've got Calvert-Lewin on the field a lot so far, and he's got a few goals, and Mecha has had a few goals as well. Um, I definitely would be looking to target some kind of versatile attacker if I were Leeds, but they do look like just a good practical side. And on the
Yeah.
point that you were making before, I guess maybe it's not about. I don't think about it in terms of changing style, but I'm like, Leeds went into this season with a plan that they would play like this. Like in the past, we've seen Leeds come up having like 60% of the ball in the Championship. They come up to the Premier League and they have like 48% or something, or maybe 50, but like they're not getting to play the way they want to play. Whereas this year, they've got 46% of the ball. They're mid-table for PPDA. They're mid-table for defensive distance, all this kind of stuff. They just seem like they're like, we're happy to play like this, and as a result things are going to plan. Like the lack of possession is something they are willing to choose rather than having just thrust on them by being unable to possess it against Premier League sides. It is a little bit light on Stardust, but then you do look at someone like Nyonto and you think, well, maybe you can get something out of him as the season goes on. But it's made Farke go up in my estimation, I've got to say. I'm quite impressed by him doing this.
Which is, I mean, going into the season, there was talk about are they going to replace him. So it's been quite.
That talk's still been going on.
Yeah, I know. Yeah,
Like,
I mean,
like the last few weeks, it's been like, oh, should Farke go? And I was like, every Leeds game I see Leeds
they're not bad.
squander a bunch of chances, kind of get footballed on the other end, and they're like, well, Daniel Farke should obviously leave. And I was like, I don't think it's this guy. For what? Like, I've been as critical about like we all have, right? Like, it's been impossible not to criticize Farke in the past, but like. Leeds right now, I think, look like a mid-table team, and now they are better than the three teams that are below them, depending obviously how West Ham's game against United goes tonight. But they're better than those teams, and they're also better than Fulham and Forest, who are just above them. So I'm not sure. I don't think that they'll necessarily finish, like where their underlying numbers suggest right now, but they are quite a difficult proposition at Elland Road, and they are just a sensible side. And watching promoted teams come up and just be pretty sensible and understand that, like, you can't defend for 90 minutes against Premier League sides. You also can't expect to come out and dominate the ball against Premier League sides. Like, sometimes I think it's actually kind of as simple as that. Like, at least as a kind of foundation for like, what do we want to do in the transfer window? How are we going to play? where else do you want to go? I mean, because we can talk about Villa, we can talk about Bournemouth. The Man City Fulham game is also kind of interesting, like because it ends 5-4 on XG. It's like more like 2-1, more like. So hot finishing kind of made it more interesting. But what was interesting as well was that City couldn't control the game. Like they don't have a shot after the 70th minute. They had 43% of the ball, Manchester City. They barely pressed. So it was very clearly like, we are going to get in our shape and we're going to hold it and see if you can break us down. And Fulham were like, we actually can kind of break you down like a little bit, like not to the tune of 2xg or something, but Fulham were creating chances, and I looked at that and I thought, City have got Real Madrid next week. This drop deep and like get in our lines, 4-5-1 or whatever they've been doing like a little bit of recently, 4-4-2 as well. I struggle to see that working against a better attack than Fulham. And like, look, I have a soft spot for Fulham, but Fulham do have no properties or characteristics of any kind. Like Fulham are just like a glass of lukewarm water. They're like you do not notice when they're like room temperature. Like that's
exactly what they are. Yeah, that's their characteristic is that they have no characteristics. Like that's Fulham. But yeah, I mean, this is what I was like concerned about. Well, one of the things I was concerned about with City going into the season, is how they would what they would do out of possession after all the transfers and all the new guys coming in. And I was like, you can't really press with these guys. It won't work well. And like, it hasn't worked well in certain cases when they've tried. But for the most part, yeah, there seems to be a recognition of that. And I do kind of appreciate as well. I mean, we saw this from like almost the midway stage of last season. But Pep has definitely doubled down on transition ball. Like if you look at the use of wingers, for example, now they're very much coming inside, trying to play around Holland and trying to play through teams. Obviously, with Foden on the ball, Doku more off ball, or Marmoush or whoever can come in. So I appreciate that. But out of possession, and this is what I think I'd written in the preview as well, is so you can't press. If you can't press, you got to have a good block. Like, you have to have a very solid block. If you want to win the title and you can't press, you have to have a defensive block as solid as Arsenal's.
Yeah.
City have not shown that ever. And they don't have the I don't see the players who are going to provide that level of solidity. Reinders in midfield. Even the center, the quality of the centre backs isn't exceptionally elite, especially in a lower block, defending deep. So that was my concern, and I mean, so far I think it does look to be a concern, and I don't really know what the solution is. I mean, I think the solution is probably to get a moderate press, which they have done sometimes in that 4-3-1-2 diamond kind of thing, which if they've measured has been okay. But I think that's the way forward, because you can't drop into a low block. If you can't, if you got whatever it is, you can give them 0.02 xg. But if you're letting Fulham score 4 goals on you, Real Madrid's attackers are a little bit better than Fulham's.
Yeah.
So it would probably go significantly worse if you try the same thing against them. So yeah, it's a difficult position for them. It's like their squad building has kind of put them in that position partly. So all the best figuring it out, I guess. I don't really have a clear solution.
I mean, well, at least in this game, it felt like do some defensive possession, guys. Like, you're up against Fulham. Fulham are not an elite pressing side.
Yeah, but I think they've kind of, with the changes to the squad, and also the style to go down double down on transition ball. I feel like they've given up on that in terms of the players they have.
Yeah, they've got too many vertical guys, especially Reinders and Doku and Haaland, sure, yeah. But at the same time, I was like, you do still have Bernardo Silva and Foden, and just sub on some guys. You could do. I mean, when I look at, Cherki's the same kind of guy, and when you look at the players that they brought on, they were able to bring on they can bring on Ake and Stones. But it's also Savio and Cherki. so yeah, you've got this team that's half built for the previous era of Manchester City,
exactly,
and half built for the next generation of it. And But I don't know. I do think teams are finding it harder to do defensive possession because Chelsea and Arsenal should be able to do it as well. And actually, Arsenal, I think, have also kind of struggled with it this season. There are games that I think, like the Sunderland game, even where you're like, this team should kind of see this game out by holding the ball. But I know they have also built towards more of a transition lineup, but they're still not that transitional.
Yeah,
they are still a control side. So I agree. Like Man City, in order to be an elite side, you're going to have to be good defensively in some way. whether it's,
you have to defend.
Yeah, unfortunately, you have to defend. You have to choose a way to defend, and if you're not choosing like pressing, you are going to have to get good at other kinds of defending. And honestly, trying to do it mid-season, now when we've got a really congested December, I don't like it. So I don't know. I think as well this game will make teams realize that City don't. Not that teams didn't know, but there's been a lot of talk about City getting back up to speed, and I think this game was actually quite good in that it more accurately represented where they are. Maybe not in the scoreline, but in their lack of control. I think a lot of teams will look at that and think, "Oh, okay, we can like go for these guys," and maybe they just absolutely cut through us. But if they don't have Haaland again. Then we've got a shot. So it was also interesting to see Foden in a more attacking role. Obviously you've written about him in the deeper role this season. Do you think that was just facilitated by Bernardo Silva coming back in and kind of playing that deeper role? Or do you think that Pep has been like kind of itching to get Foden back in the front line?
I'm not sure, to be honest, but I think at least it's good to have both options. And certainly, now he works with the way he's playing. He works better, and the team is set up. He works better in this right wing role as well, because like I said, the wingers are coming inside, so it's not like he's being shoved out wide, which sometimes in the past he was, and sometimes worked well, sometimes not so much. I think definitely right now he doesn't seem suited to be like a wide winger. So yeah, I think this is also quite a good role for him, where he can help facilitate the transitions, right? Because usually when you look at like City's front three, so you've obviously got Holland. It's usually on the left, whether that's Doku or Marmoush. I mean, it's mostly been Doku lately. That's the more kind of like dynamic runner type of guy, whether that's with or without the ball. That's the more direct threat, like besides Holland, who's going to try and like burst through your defense. And then coming in off the right, whether that's Foden or Sherky, that's the more ball to feet kind of connector who can receive on the half turn, play a through pass, or link up in like between the lines. So I think this role rather also suits him pretty well. I mean, in midfield, what they're trying to do, I mean, obviously one is personnel, and Silva coming back, as you say, is an important one when they want to try and control games. Like at least him being there and maybe doing something. But like the issue, I think, also is the fullbacks, because they don't have fullbacks who are particularly great, at least starting off, at circulating in the way they might want or in the way they did before. So you maybe gotta probably gotta take off O'Reilly for Ake or something if you want to try and do that. But yeah, at least having Silva gives you some semblance of control when you want it, because Reinders is going to give it to you, and Nico Gonzalez might try, but he might not always do so well. So it does work in that sense.
Yeah. Okay. Well. What about who else do you want to talk about here? Because there's also, well, I don't know. We've talked about Villa. Like, look, I'll just say on Villa, they haven't really had this is like their best performance of the season. Like, this was like the only game in the season so far where they've had significantly more chances created than their opponent, and they still gave up 3 goals and went 2 goals down. So it was a really good attacking game, but it was like pretty bad defensively. I've just never, like, so many games this season, I've seen them be okay defensively, but in those games they're horrible in attack. And then I've seen games where they can put up a little bit more, but they just get cut through. I just haven't seen like good Premier League performances from them. In a way, it like plays into, this is the Emery thing, right? Which is Emery's like, we are doing attack or we are doing defense. Those are our 2 settings. And in this game, it was like, well, we're 2-0 down. So I guess we're doing attack. And, against Brighton, that kind of works. But I just, like, Villa are third, man. Like, I do enjoy it, Villa. That's great. and it gives you time to work out like what the hell is going on with this team. But the numbers on this team are rancid, and truly, I just haven't seen the team play well domestically at all this season, not once, which is kind of shocking. And I don't have more than that. I just look at Villa and I think I worry about you guys. Watkins had a good game. That's nice because he had a diabolical season up until now. Look, I mean, maybe we should leave the Premier League round up there because there are other teams that we'd like to talk about another time. You know, like it'd be interesting to dig a bit into Bournemouth and see how they're going. You know, they've obviously had some bad results, I guess, but you know, again, the parity in the Premier League means that you're kind of always 2 points away from where you quote unquote deserve to be. Should we head over to Scotland then? Because before we got out of here today, we did want to talk about Celtic appointing Wilfried Nancy as their new coach coming in to replace Brendan Rodgers. He comes in from Columbus Crew. He's had a pretty good time in North America. Came to head coaching pretty late, right? You know, he's only been doing it for the last 4 years. Has only been in those positions for the last 4 years, and yet he's in his late 40s. So he's a bit of a later guy, and he's had success. Obviously, won the MLS Cup, went to the final of the CONCACAF Champions Cup. But it does seem that the attraction here is stylistic, right, Neel?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, for one, his journey is also super interesting because he was actually born and grew up in France,
Yeah.
played there at pretty low level and like mostly semi-pro. But then he moved to Quebec in 2005 as initially as a player coach, but then quickly as a coach to the Quebec system. He joined the Montreal Impact, as they were called then, academy when it started in 2011. So it's like youth age group stuff, under 18s, under 16s, all that. Then he became the first team assistant for the Montreal Impact in 2016. As you said, first head coach role in 2021, which was after. Do you want to guess who? This is a guy you know. So if you haven't read this, do you want to guess who like Nancy succeeded? So some guy resigned.
At
And,
Montreal?
yes.
It must be Thierry Henry.
Indeed, it was, yes. So he
Yeah.
took over like mid-season after Henri resigned. There's an interesting story as well there because so he won the Canadian Championship in like after taking over, which is not hard. You have to basically beat two MLS teams, and it's like a cup. It's basically like their cup in Canada, but like for an
Sure.
MLS, it's realistically between the three MLS teams. So you got to beat the other two, and you're fine. But what that does give you is it gives you a spot in the CONCACAF Champions League. So they went to the Champions League next season, which is 2022, and I think they got knocked out in like the quarterfinals or one of the knockouts by Sporting KC, Sporting Kansas City, who were like really low down in MLS, and so their owner Joey Saputo got mad, and they had like an argument, like Nancy and Saputo, and he wanted like reportedly wanted to resign at that point, but then he spoke to the players and eventually changed his mind, and eventually they ended up putting together their like best ever regular season in MLS, and they got to the quarterfinals of the MLS Cup. So that was an interesting kind of season for him. His first full season as a head coach. Then eventually got bought out by the Columbus Crew, and as you said, had supremely successful, like the club's most successful period ever. And yeah, the style of play is definitely the most interesting because they generally try to play a very possession based style of football. Uh, when like they try to have close to like 60% possession. Uh, did so in the last couple of seasons. This season it hasn't gone as well in terms of both like
Yeah.
how well they've been able to execute and also the results. But I would say that's uh, at least partly down to the player quality as well, because they've lost a few key players and haven't been able to bring in like that level of quality for a variety of reasons, including whatever I understand of MLS's amazing rules. So I wouldn't put too much blame on him for that. Although obviously there's some room for improvement for sure. But what we've seen generally, certainly over the last couple of seasons where I was following more closely, was like a very possession based style of football, but also like you could almost compare it to Dead Serbi and his Brighton side and his his Shakhtar side in certain ways. So for one, they did line up in a 3-4-2-1.
Yeah.
And I mean, the structure of it was quite different. So, like with that Zerbi, for example, you get like pretty flat lines, like a flat back three. Two holding midfielders quite deep. With
Hmm.
Nossi, you actually get a very triangular back three. So, like as they get out of their own third, like the two wide centre backs step up almost like alongside the defensive midfielders. So it's a very kind of triangular shape they used to make. And their ideas usually were to like just circulate across that shape, bait the opposition out, and then hit forward quickly. So it was like a lot of like not a lot, but a good amount of deep circulation, press baiting, or at least baiting the opposition out of
Yeah.
shape as much as you can. And they play like some pretty risky passes, also a lot of like quick short passes which look risky, but that's how you get the opposition out. And then hit forward quickly. So I think they executed quite well last couple of seasons. Obviously had some great players, like Cucho Hernandez, for example, was the star when they won the MLS Cup, and he's obviously now at Real Betis. They had some excellent midfielders as well. Aiden Morris moved on to Middlesbrough.
Hmm.
Darlington Nakbe is, I mean, obviously American.
35.
Yeah, he's 35, but American like listeners will know he's really, really good for exactly this style of play where you're playing a lot of quick passes, trying to retain the ball. He's really good for that. And so yeah, they had a lot of success in this manner. Like opponents found it very hard to like stop themselves from trying to take the bait, and then stop the
Hmm.
attackers from hurting them. So it was a super fun team to watch. And yeah, like that's broadly what he did at the Crew. Now it'll be interesting to see what he does at Celtic, because like for one, just like structurally, does he try to implement this kind of structure,
Hmm.
or will he change some stuff up depending on Celtic squad, because obviously they've been playing a back four for the most part. And the other main question I have is like, so they have this excellent base structure which is like super well drilled, and they play these quick like short quick snappy connections excellently. I mean, for one, how quickly can he instill that?
Sure.
Because
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
believe there isn't a winter break this season in Scotland, so like the time element of it is a question. Training time, and obviously the title race is close. Like I think Celtic now have the net lead, but it's like a point in it. So still very close, and you can't afford to slip up too much. Although Hearts have not kind of continued their start to the season as well as they might like. And then the other question is the attack, because at the Crew, like I think one of the main reasons behind the drop off is that he was fairly reliant on like the individual stars he had in the attack. So all this excellent stuff deep down, but then you, like for example, hit a ball in the channel and hope that Cucho makes a good run, beats a
Hmm.
defender, and gets a finish. And you can do that in Scotland, to be honest with Celtic. Like you'll get your attackers to beat defenders on most days. But it's this Celtic squad isn't obviously as strong as it was just a couple of years ago.
Yeah.
So another slight question. But yeah, the main one is like how quickly can he implement this, and what does he do in the meantime? Because we know like Celtic, like for example under Ange, have had a great amount of success with this kind of a style of play. So like the fit is very obviously there, but I think it's just a question of execution.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it is a pretty tough run for them up until the early days of January, which is when they have the Old Firm derby. Are you surprised it's taken somebody this long to come in for him? Because he has been persistently linked with moves, especially obviously to France. Um, but the style does feel, I mean, it feels like it should scale very well for Celtic.
Yeah.
How it would function in a tougher league, I'm not sure. But is it surprising to you that it's taken this long?
I mean, like yes and no, because
Hmm.
as you say, the main question is the style, right? And like even in MLS, like even if you aren't, I mean, there's no team which is as dominant as Celtic, but you're not also in a position where you're like I don't know, Lorient in Liga, for example,
Hmm.
where I mean you can be in that position if you really mess up your like squad building. In fact, some teams are from time to time, but like the Columbus Crew definitely were not at any point under Nancy in that kind of a position. So now if it's a club from a Big Five league, like it would be a pretty bold move for one of the Champions League contenders to go in and bring him straight from MLS, given his background as well, the fact that he's not really coached or even played at a high level in Europe. So that would be his like first job in that kind of a top flight league. So I think it was always going to be this kind of a club, like in one of the secondary or tertiary leagues, a dominant side who comes in for him. And yeah, I guess there obviously have been a few openings from time to time, but it 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 does make sense. I mean, I would say also from Celtic's point of view, like their process to replace Rogers and the names they were linked to was completely all over the place. Because at one point they were in for Robbie Keane, and then
Yeah.
whatever happened, and then now they're eventually getting Nancy, and yeah, like I think I mean, they're still probably the favorites to win the league at this point, but like they would be quite lucky to do so because they haven't like planned stuff well, and they've managed to get this interim spell from Martin O'Neill like absolutely gone amazing, where he's won every single game, which could easily have gone a different way in another time. So it's obviously, I think it works out well for them in the end, but it's not a good process for them with the way they've gone about it.
Yeah, and I mean the connection between the club and the fans at the moment is in a pretty bad way.
Yeah.
Recruitment this summer as well, big question marks there. Fortunately in Scotland you can
You
kind
can
of
still win
make
the league.
you can make a bunch of big mistakes and still win the league, but also Celtic fans are demanding, and rightly so. And so it'll be interesting. But I kind of imagine it'll go well, and I think
Yeah.
that I think they'll probably love it. Okay, I think that just about wraps us for today. Obviously, we would like to ask everybody listening to drop your questions in the comments below and to sign up to our Patreon, patreon.com/thetransferflow. If you haven't done so already, there is an episode out this week with me and Ted. Unfortunately, we lost a bit at the end where we were talking about our favourite non-Arsenal players. We did, in fact, record that. We do actually have favourite non-Arsenal players, but we lost it this week. So I'm afraid that sucks. But we've still got a really interesting conversation about Ted's biggest mistakes during his career in the game. Neel, thanks so much for being here. Where can people find you when you're not working at the Transfer Flow and you're not writing on the newsletter?
Yeah, apparently you can get some very stupid takes at Shailat Neel on Blue Sky or on Twitter, as my former what do I even call you?
Come on, figure it out.
I've lost the word as the person who represented me last said.
Your stand-in, your substitute.
Yeah. Well, I thought I was a substitute, but I don't know what happened.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, that's true. Actually, I had to come on for the guy
like
who was meant to be covering me.
Yeah, like it was like like the first choice player's injured, so he's kind of recovering. But he's on the bench, and then the backup guy gets injured.
I was on the bench. I was in the treatment room. I was like, they had to like stretcher me onto the pitch, so that I could do the last 15 minutes.
Like, I mean, this doesn't happen in football, but like in cricket, it does. Where like like a batter's kind of done his hamstring, so he can't run anymore. So he gets retired hurt, but then at the end, like when the team's, for example, 9 wickets down, which for non-cricket fans is like in baseball, I guess, when you are all the outs except one out. I don't know, when you have one out left. I don't know.
I love
follow baseball.
You try and explain this. I knew
basically,
that you had no idea what you were talking about.
At the end of the innings, the guy comes back and he can just stand. So he just tries to hit the ball as much as he possibly can.
Yeah, he just like defends basically. It's like it's like everyone's. It's like he's just kind of doing horde mode or something. Like he's just got to like guard the wicket. He's not going to move.
Yeah, exactly. So look, if you follow cricket, you know what I'm talking about. If you don't, sucks to be you, because I can't explain it.
Yeah. Well, what an end to the show today, Neel. What an end.
Amazing.
Thank you very much for being here. Thank you to all of you for listening as well. I know we've been a bit erratic recently for obvious reasons, but we do appreciate you being here. We've got loads more stuff coming up this month. We're going to keep going up until Christmas. And then obviously once January starts, as I've said before, player
Oh
profiles,
boy.
transfer reports, all sorts of interesting stuff coming your way. Thank you very much, and we'll see you next time. Bye.